Om, Om. There we go. Sorry. All right. Good. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahana Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karavavahayi Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvisha vahayi. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om. Very good. Welcome back. We continue our study of Chapter 13. And I'm pushing all wrong buttons here today. Sorry. I want to welcome all of you here and to also show our online viewers and also to welcome our online viewers. In fact, let me make an important announcement here. From our online viewers and perhaps from some of you, we're getting a lot of emails, questions, and a lot of comments on the videos that are posted. And it's wonderful to see all of those comments and emails. Thank you to all of you. Your interest and engagement is really important, and that really it's a really good thing. Unfortunately, there are too many questions, more questions than I can answer, and so going forward, instead of answering specific questions, and by the way, if you send an email or a comment, I should mention that I read every comment, but I can't respond to comments. I also read every email, but I might not reply to certain emails because it's just getting to be too much. But what I can tell you is if you send a question, either in a comment or an email, I will have read it. I will know that it's an issue where there's some lack of clarity, and I will do my best to incorporate it in the class. For example, there's a question here, came by email, and I will be incorporating that question into today's class. So, enough said. Let us begin our recitation. We'll begin with verse 24. As always, be sure to read the translation while I'm chanting, and then repeat after me. Yahevam veti purusham, Yahevam veti purusham, Prakritim chagunai saha, Prakritim chagunai saha, Sarvata vartamanopi, Sarvata vartamanopi, na sabhuyo bhijayate, na sabhuyo bhijayate, dhyanenatmani pashyanti, dhyanenatmani pashyanti, kechiratmanam kechiratmanam Anye sankhena yogena, Anye sankhena yogena, Karma yogena chapare, Karma yogena chapare, Anye tvevamajanantaha, Anye tvevamajanantaha, Shrutwanyebhyah upasate, Shrutwanyebhyah upasate, te pichatitaranthyeva, te pichantyantarantyeva, mrityum shrutiparayanaha, mrityum shrutiparayanaha, yavat sanjayate kenchata, yavat sanjayate kenchata, Sattvam Stavara Jangamam, Sattvam Stavara Jangamam, Kshetrajna Samyogat, Kshetrajna Samyogat, Tadvidhi Bharatarshava, Tadvidhi Bharatarshava, Samam Sarveshu Bhuteshu, Samam Sarveshu Bhuteshu, Tishtantam Parameshwaram, Tishtantam Parameshwaram, Vinashyatsva Vinashyantam, Vinashyatsva Vinashyantam, Yah Pashyati Sa Pashyati, Yah Pashyati Sa Pashyati, Samam Pashyan Hi Sarvatra, Samam Pashyan Hi Sarvatra, Samavastitam Ishwaram, Samavastitam Ishwaram, Nahinastyatmanatmanam, Nahinastyatmanatmanam, Tato yati param gatim, Tato yati param gatim. Very good. Good. As we pick up the thread here, so in chapter 13, the third of Arjuna's 3 pairs of questions was about Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, nature. And there's a great deal of emphasis in chapter 13 in particular, but in the Bhagavad Gita in general, on the nature of consciousness. As many of you were here in our meditation session, it was quite clear the importance of understanding your consciousness to be unchanging and utterly unaffected by anything, any worldly troubles, any difficulties. And that's why we ended our last class with verse 24. That's why Sri Krishna says, the one who knows this Purusham, this consciousness, Prakritam cha, along with the nature that surrounds us all, one who knows that sarvata vartamanaha api, even while engaged in ordinary actions, nasa bhuyo abhijayate, that person is freed from being reborn, that person gains moksha even here in this lifetime. Just a quick comment. So many people ask, Swamiji, is it really possible to gain moksha in this lifetime? It's a valid question. And the correct answer is the fact that you're asking that question shows that it's indeed possible. The question occurred to you. You understand what is moksha. You understand the possibility of being free from suffering. The very fact that you're asking that question shows that you have come to the lifetime in which reaching moksha is indeed possible. Okay, that's where we left off. And now our topic in the next 2 verses is how to gain that knowledge of Purusha, consciousness, and Prakriti, nature. How to become enlightened is basically the topic. And the next two verses, if we take them in the normal order, it will be very confusing. This is one of the rare times where it will be less confusing if we take the next 2 verses in reverse order. And you'll see why as we go through. So instead of verse 25, we'll go to verse 26, and then we'll back up to verse 25. Anye tvevam ajanantaha, anye tvevam ajanantaha, shrutvan yebhyah upasate, shrutvan yebhyah upasate, tepi chati tarantyeva, tepi chati tarantyeva, mrityum shruti parayanaha, mrityum shuti parayanaha. Anye, to others Evam, thus, ajanantaha, not knowing. So the confusion would be the first verse, the prior verse would be very confusing if we didn't see this anye tu. So that makes it clear. Anye tu, but others, evam ajanantaha, who don't understand thus. What does that mean? They don't understand what is Purusha, they don't understand what is Prakriti, and not in an abstract, conceptual, or philosophical way. We've had this discussion many times. These teachings are about you, Prakriti and Purusha. Purusha is your consciousness, the consciousness because of which you're aware of what's happening right this moment. So Purusha and Prakriti are not an abstract philosophical concept. Talking about you. You have a body, mind, senses, Prakriti, and you are a conscious being, Purusha. But anye too. But there are some who, evam ajanantaha, not properly discerning what is consciousness, what is body, mind, and senses, one who gets them confused, one who is ignorant. What about them? Shrutva, having heard, having listened, anyebhyaha, from others, presumably from gurus. So having learned from a guru what is Purusha and Prakriti, and upasate, and meditating on that. Many of you have been in a class where we've discussed Shravana, Manana, and Nididhyasana, the main practice of Advaita Vedanta. Shravana, hearing these teachings and using them for a process of self-inquiry. Manana, resolving any doubts, any vagueness. And Nididhyasana, Vedantic contemplation, assimilating that. And here, Sri Krishna refers to that process. So, anye, those others who are as yet ignorant of this truth, of what is Purusha and Prakriti, those who are not yet enlightened. What about them? Shrutva, having heard anyebhyaha, from gurus. So having heard from gurus, Shravana. Also the idea is when you hear, by the way, when you read from a book, there's a limitation, and that is if you have some confusion. Actually, this is very good to realize. When you read something and you're not sure about what it means in a book, what do? Correct? Well, that doesn't work. So when you're with a guru and you don't understand something correctly, you ask a question. So there comes the manana, shravana, hearing these teachings and being engaged in a process of self-inquiry based on these teachings. Also manana, a process of removing doubts with the guru's assistance. And upasate, there's nididhyasana, meditation, assimilation of these teachings using Vedantic contemplation. What about them? Te in the third line. In the fourth line, Shuti parayanaha, those who have resorted to the scriptures. Scriptures giving you the guidance. And what about them? Te api, they also, cha atitaranti, atitaranti, cross over. Eva, indeed. What do they cross over? Mrityum, death. And death is a symbol for all that is undesirable. Suffering, struggle, sadness, depression, etc. So they also cross over suffering because they are shruti parayanaha. They are guided by the scriptural knowledge as given by one's guru. Again, if it's just scripture, you can't ask questions. You just flip pages. There's a wonderful story that illustrates what Sri Krishna is teaching here. The truth you are seeking, the truth of your own inner divinity, the truth that your consciousness is in fact limitless, unborn, uncreated, vast, perfect, complete, utterly untouched by suffering, that consciousness is already the truth of who you are. As you've heard me say many times, you already, actually my Guru's words are nice here. He said, you already are that which you want to become. That inner divinity is an already existent fact. But due to the so-called veil of ignorance, it remains, I'll go there. It remains unrecognized in the present moment because you don't, it's a truth that's right here, right now, but unrecognized due to the veil of ignorance. The story is a wonderful story about a farmer who owned a plot of land, and the farmer was told underneath the ground is a treasure of gold. This farmer was really excited. By the way, this metaphor means when you heard once, you heard more than once that your true nature is divine. So hearing your true nature is divine is like the farmer hearing that there's buried treasure on his land. But now the problem is how to find it. He can dig here, he can dig there, he can dig and dig and dig. When will he find that treasure? Not likely. In the same way, knowing that your true nature is divine, the issue is how to discover that inner divinity. And we need some guidance. The farmer needs someone who knows where the treasure is buried, exactly where the treasure is buried. In the same way, in spiritual life, we need a guru and scripture, that can give us the guidance that we require to find that inner divinity. Next part of the metaphor is really important, and that is, the guru says, the person who knows where the treasure is hidden tells the farmer, dig here. That person doesn't dig the hole. Who digs? The farmer. The farmer digs. The person who knows just tells him where to dig. This is such an important part of that metaphor because it shows the guru and scripture tell you where and how to look for and discover that inner divinity, but you have to make the effort. You have to make the discovery. No one can make a discovery for you. It's up to you. So just like the person tells the farmer, dig here, in this case, the scriptures and the guru tell you, perform this kind of self-inquiry. Look within yourself in this manner. But you have to figuratively dig the hole. You have to undergo that process of self-inquiry. Nice. I think on my YouTube channel, there's a video on this story. It's a delightful story called Hiranya Nidhi. Hiranya, golden, Nidhi, treasure. You can go and look for that video. It's very cute. All right, let's continue. So here's where we see the confusion that would be caused by these two verses. This verse starts with anye tu, those who are ignorant. And that tu sets it apart. Excuse me. That tu is the English word but. But there are others who are ignorant. Since this verse begins with but there are others who are ignorant, then we presume that the previous verse is talking about those who are not ignorant. And that wouldn't be obvious unless you saw this verse first. So that's why we saw them in reverse order. So now backing up. Dhyanenatmani pashyanti, dhyanenatmani pashyanti, kechidatmanamatmana, kechidatmanamatmana, anye sankyena yogena, anye sankyena yogena, karma yogena chapare, karma yogena chapare. Second line, kechit, some people. First line, pashyanti, they see, they discover what? Atmanam, one's true self. How? Atmana, by oneself. You have to dig deep, so to speak, within yourself. So there are some people who made that discovery, and the context is these are people who have already heard the scriptures taught by a guru, so they know where to dig, figuratively speaking. They know how to do that process of self-inquiry. But in that process of self-inquiry, it's possible that there are several obstacles. And obstacles to spiritual growth. For example, if you don't meditate and your mind is all jumbled, that mind, that untrained, undisciplined mind would be an obstacle to enlightenment. Even if you have Guru and Shastra, if you don't have a mind that's available, a mind that can concentrate, a mind that can hear properly, it's not going to work. Similarly, if your mind is all full of, and some people suffer a lot, lots of hurt, anger, frustration, resentment. If your mind is filled with all of these intense negative emotions, how can the Guru's instructions go in? So that's another example of an impediment. So an impediment would be like the person who knows where the treasure is hidden tells the farmer, dig here. And then the farmer starts digging, and before long comes across a big rock. So that rock stands in the way of reaching the buried treasure. So just like that rock is an obstacle for the farmer, there are many obstacles in spiritual life. And in this verse, Sri Krishna talks about 3 of those obstacles in spiritual life. So in this verse, he addresses those who, with the help of Guru and Shastra, they've already been pointed in the right direction. But then, how to successfully perform that process of self-inquiry. Here Sri Krishna says, Kechit, some of them, pashyanti, discover atmanam, one's true self, atmana, by making one's own effort. They discover it how? Dhyanena, through meditation. They discover it atmani, within oneself. So that meditation is crucial. Notice we've had this discussion before, and I don't want to make this a big issue, but meditation alone won't make you enlightened. But without meditation, you're not likely to get enlightened. And you see the subtle distinction here? If you just go and sit in a cave and meditate without knowing what to meditate on, without knowing how to perform this process of self-inquiry, without knowing where to dig. Imagine a farmer just digging countless holes in the ground. That would be like someone meditating in a cave without knowing what they should meditate on. Got it? So meditation alone will not make you enlightened. But the point Sri Krishna is making here is, without meditation, without a prepared mind, without a mind that's very well suited for grasping these subtle teachings. And how do you get a mind that reaches that state of being fully prepared. Meditation is one aspect of that. So dhyanena, through the practice of meditation, so meditation removes an obstacle. What is the obstacle? An untrained, undisciplined, unfocused mind is the first obstacle. Third line, anye, and there are others who, and you bring down the first time, that pashyanti atmanam atmana, that all applies to the second and third line as well. Others discover the true self within themselves. By making that effort, they discover it how? Sankhyena yogena. Yogena, through this particular spiritual practice called Sankhya. And many of you will remember back in chapter 2, Sankhya is the word Sri Krishna uses for spiritual wisdom, jnanam. So others gain this discovery. Others discover the true self within, the inner divinity. They discover through Sankhyena Yogena, through these spiritual teachings, which means, actually, what is the obstacle talked about here? It means you have to listen, you have to continue performing this process of self-inquiry. How long? Well, until you get it. So the farmer starts digging, and after he digs down a foot or two, he asks the fellow, how deep do I have to dig? And what will he say? You dig until you reach the treasure, obviously. So here, how long should you be engaged in this process of self-inquiry, guided by the Shastra, as unfolded by your guru, your teacher? How long should you be engaged in that process of self-inquiry until you discover your true nature? So here the obstacle that's being described is lack of persistence. You know, many people want a quick fix. Vedanta is not a quick fix. Okay. And the final step is, again, that kechit atmanam atmana pashyanti, all of that applies to not only to the first line, but also to the third and fourth line. So there are others who, through a process of self-inquiry, they make the effort and discover the truth of themselves within themselves through their own effort. How do they do that? Apare, others do, in the last line, apare, and others discover it how? Karma yogena, through karma yoga. Now be very clear, just like meditation won't make you enlightened, karma yoga won't make you enlightened. And most of you know that karma yoga is a preparatory practice. It makes you prepared for these teachings to go in. Earlier I mentioned someone whose mind and heart is just filled with so much anger and frustration and hurt and resentment. How will these teachings help such a person if that person is so mired in their emotional mess? Sorry to use that kind of language. Mired in that emotional mess, therefore not prepared to undertake this process of self-inquiry. What is required to handle that emotional mess? Karma yoga. Karma yoga is the key. We've discussed karma yoga extensively, but it's all based on your understanding of Ishvara, the God of the cosmos, Ishvara as the karma phala data, as the giver of the results of your deeds. Which means karma yoga is based on an understanding of Ishvara. Karma yoga is based on a relationship with Ishvara. Karma yoga is not separate from bhakti. bhakti, as many people wrongly believe. Karma yoga and bhakti absolutely go together, and that's not our topic here, so I won't go further into it. So, the next verse talks about those who lack knowledge and can gain that knowledge from guru and teachings. This verse talks about those who have a guru, those who have access to the scriptures, but have some obstacles in that process of self-inquiry. I like that Hiranya Nidhi story. Go and look for that video. It's cute. There's some animations in it, and it has a very powerful message. I think the title is Seeking the Treasure Within, something like that. Seeking the Treasure. If you search for Seeking the Treasure Within or Hiranya Nidhi, go to my YouTube channel. You'll find it. Okay, let us proceed. Yavat sanjayate kinchata, yavat sanjayate kinchata, sattvam sthavara jangamam, sattvam sthavara jangamam, kshetrajna samyogat, kshetrajna samyogat, tadvidhi bharatarshava, Tadvidhi Bharatarshava, Bharata Rishabha, O bull of India, O Arjuna, Tadvidhi, this you should understand. What should you understand? Now, top of the verse. You should understand yavat, this, that, kinchit sanjayate, whatever is born. By the way, I have to give the translator negative marks here. Who is the translator? Me? So the commentator makes it very clear. Sanjayate can mean that which comes into existence. Commentator makes it very clear, that which is born. So yavat sanjayate kinchit. Anything that is born, any sattvam, any being, any sattvam, any being, which is sanjayate, which is born, sthavara jangamam. So you can't translate sthavara jangamam as living or non-living, because it says born. Born means living. So the living and non-living is a good translation in other contexts. Here, a more literal translation would be better. More literal translation, many of you know, sthavaram, unmoving, jangamam, moving. Bhujanga is that which moves on the earth. Gam, that which goes. So sthavara, unmoving, and sthavara, unmoving, and jangamam, moving. Please correct my translation. Minus points. And so that which is, you're thinking, that which is born but doesn't move. Like a tree, like a plant, like in the ocean, these mollusks that live on rocks or coral. There are plenty of living beings that don't move. We move a lot, but there are living beings that don't move. So whatever living being is born, whether it's like a tree and it doesn't move, or whether it has legs and walks around, O Arjuna Tadvidhi, you should understand that that living being is kshetrajna samyogat. That living being is born from the samyoga. You get the idea? Samyoga, the connection. The connection of what? Kshetra, field of experience. That's what our chapter opened with. And here kshetra is a synonym for prakriti, nature. So the samyoga, the joining of kshetra or prakriti, nature, with what? Kshetrajna, the knower of the field of experience, consciousness, which brings us back to Purusha. So kshetra and kshetrajna here have the same meaning as prakriti and purusha, or simply put, nature and consciousness. Sri Krishna tells Arjuna, Arjuna, whatever exists here, whatever living being is born, and this is where my translation is deficient. Any living being that is born due to the union of prakriti, physicality, and purusha, consciousness. Now there's a very important teaching, and that'll also address this question with regard to the last class about robots not having consciousness. Let's discuss that. Do robots have consciousness? Tricky, and if you think about it, it's a little trickier than you think. Do trees have consciousness? Do mollusks have consciousness? Do rocks have consciousness? I'm just asking questions right now. And here's the complexity, and that is purusha. Remember in a prior class we distinguished between the Sankhya definition of purusha and the Vedantic definition of purusha? Purusha meaning consciousness. In Vedanta, in Sankhya, consciousness are many. Every individual being has a private consciousness. According to Vedanta, that's absolutely wrong. There is one all-pervasive consciousness, and that one all-pervasive consciousness becomes manifest in every living being. So that consciousness is manifest in your mind. The very same consciousness is manifest in my mind. The very same consciousness is manifest in the mind of a cockroach, if a cockroach has a mind. One all-pervasive consciousness. Consciousness has no boundary or limit. We feel, even though your true nature is consciousness, that consciousness is not stuck inside your head or inside your body. It feels like that because that's the physicality. It's like the metaphor that's given is space in this pot. Pot space. We can speak of pot space because you experience pot space. But tell me, is the space inside this pot trapped, stuck, confined? My guru used to make fun of this. I'm smiling because I remember him so fondly. So he is this very traditional, very well-known, respected scholar and teacher of Vedanta, and then he'll make fun by speaking in a funny voice. He'll give voice to the space inside this pot, and this very big dadiwala and all of this, very, looking like this, and then he'll say that. Then he'll start talking like this. I'm this tiny little pot space. And the reason I'm sharing this is that he was able to have fun and didn't take himself so seriously, and I think that's such a wonderful quality. Anyway, I'm sidetracking myself entirely because I want to talk about this tiny little pot space, which he would animate. He'd say, oh, I'm this tiny little pot space. Well, this pot space, in terms of your experience, may look limited or finite or confined. Is it really? Space is all pervasive. Space is not stuck inside this pot. Space is not stuck inside this room. Instead of saying space is in this room, wouldn't it be more accurate to say this room is in space? Is space inside this pot? Correct. But more correct to say this pot is in space. With that in mind, is consciousness in your body and mind? Yes, but more correct to say your body and mind exist within all-pervasive consciousness. Consciousness has no edge, no boundary, no limit. But we may experience ourselves as finite entities because, like, you can experience pot space, but the experience doesn't make it real. This is one of the most profound teachings of Advaita Vedanta, and that is just because you experience it doesn't make it real. You experience the sun going down. Doesn't really go down. You experience a blue sky. Air is clear. Experience doesn't necessarily tell you what is real. Experience fools us all the time. And here, your experience of a limited pot space can fool you into thinking that that space is somehow stuck inside this pot. It's not. In the same way, your experience of yourself as a finite, limited entity can fool you into thinking that your consciousness is stuck inside. Consciousness is not stuck inside. Okay? Oh, I have to pick up my thread now. So, one all-pervasive consciousness, which means, is consciousness in a rock? What would keep it out? Right? That which is all-pervasive means what? It can go in and through everything. So all-pervasive consciousness is necessarily present in a rock. Is consciousness present in a robot? Just like a rock. But then what is the difference? And here we find a brilliant teaching in the scriptures about how consciousness is all-pervasive, but that all-pervasive consciousness is only reflected or manifest under certain specific conditions. What are and the metaphor that's used, I have to give you this famous metaphor, you've heard it perhaps before, just like the sun shining on a bucket of water, the sun gets reflected in that bucket of water. You look into the bucket, you can see a reflection of the sun. So imagine now the sun is shining, and there are maybe 80 buckets of water in this room. One consciousness shining upon 80 living human beings, giving rise to 80 reflections or manifestations of that one consciousness. One sun, many reflections. One consciousness, many manifestations. But notice, in order for that sun to be reflected in the bucket has to be full of water. This is your bucket. When this bucket is full of life, when this is full of prana, life, when it's full of indriyas, sense organs, when it is full of manas, mind, buddhi, when this physical body is endowed with all of these powers and capacities, all of which we collectively call sukshma sharira, subtle body. So we distinguish the physical body, which is like a container. We distinguish it from the sukshma sharira, the life and intelligence within this physical container. And that prepares us now to understand. Wherever the bucket is empty of water, it doesn't reflect the sun. Wherever there is an object empty of life, it doesn't reflect consciousness, doesn't make consciousness manifest. Wherever there is life, consciousness is manifest, and consciousness is manifest to the extent that you have life. So human beings are intensely alive. The activity that goes on in your mind is just something amazing. So because of the complexity of the life in that invests our bodies, because of that, consciousness is very fully manifest in us. Take a tree or a plant or a cockroach. They are living things, so they have life within them, but that life is at a much, we'll say, lower level, less complex level. So according to the level of complexity, the level of complexity being far less in a tree, in a plant, in a cockroach. So what we would say is that consciousness is equally present in a human being and a tree, but that consciousness is less manifest by the tree or plant or cockroach due to its lesser complexity. Now, what about a rock? Rock has no life whatsoever. It's like the empty pot. The sun can shine on that empty bucket. The sun can shine on that empty bucket. It won't reflect the sun. The sun can, consciousness can be pervade and be present in a rock, but not be reflected. Now we can answer the question about robot. Easy now. Is consciousness present in a robot? Absolutely. You can't keep it out, just like the rock. But is consciousness manifest in the robot? The robot is a machine. It's only physical stuff. The robot has no life force. So the robot has no prana, life force, has not the mind and intellect that a human being has. The robot was not born. That which gets born, that's what this verse is about. That which gets born is endowed with a subtle body. This relates to the doctrine of karma. Why do you get born at all? Because that sukshma sharira, the traveling entity, has a lot of karma that needs to be discharged. In order for that sukshma sharira to discharge its karma, it needs a physical body, so that subtle body will then become associated with a physical body. We call that birth. What is the birthday of a robot? Not born, assembled, fine. And maybe you can say there's a time when you go click and push the button and turn the robot on, but the robot was not born. The robot does not possess a subtle body, therefore that robot does not make consciousness manifest. Okay, so back to this. So Arjuna, please understand that in every living thing, we find this samyoga, this combination of physicality, kshetra, and consciousness, kshetrajna. And the whole purpose of this chapter is to help us discern the difference between kshetra and kshetrajna. Okay. Then, samam sarveshu bhuteshu, samam sarveshu bhuteshu, tishtantam parameshwaram, tishtantam parameshwaram, vinashyat swavinashyantam, vinashyat swavinashyantam, yah pashyati sapashyati, yah pashyati sapashyati. Yaha pashyati, one who sees. One who sees what? First word, samam, the same. The same what? Samam, drop a line, parameshwaram. One who sees the same supreme being. Now, supreme being here, what we're talking, our context, we're talking about consciousness, aren't we? Sri Krishna calls your consciousness, he calls as Parameshwaram or Paramatma. Your consciousness is the inner divinity. And inner divinity, let me, just to make that term, inner divinity will become clear. We'll just see that. So, Yaha Pashyati, one who sees, Samam Parameshwaram, the same, let me just loosely say, the same inner divinity. I think is a nice nuanced translation here. One who sees the same inner divinity, Tishtantam, abiding where? Sarveshu bhuteshu, in all living beings. One who sees the same inner divinity manifest within all living beings. And that point about inner divinity, look below. Vinashyatsu avinashyantam, breaking the words apart. That which is avinashyat, undecaying, vinashyatsu, in those things that decay. That which is decaying is not divine. I mean, if you leave a piece of fruit out for a week or two, it'll decay and it could even stink. What about a physical body, a dead body? Nothing divine about that which decays, vinashyatsu. But that which is undecaying, that which is immortal, that which is eternal, that inner divinity consciousness. Your body is born, not consciousness. Consciousness, the consciousness preceded your birth. Like the sun was shining before there were buckets of water. The sun is shining when there's a bucket of water. You take the bucket away, the sun continues shining. That sun represents the eternal, unborn, uncreated inner divinity, which is consciousness, your true nature. So one who sees the same inner divinity abiding within all people, saha yaha pashyati, one who sees that, saha pashyati, that person truly sees. One who sees the same inner divinity abiding in all beings, that person sees truly. The commentator makes a very nice expression. He says that person sees Shastra chakshusha. Shastra, scripture, chakshus, eyes. That person sees with the eyes of the scripture. That person sees with eyes of wisdom, eyes of knowledge, when we see the same inner divinity. Contrary-wise, one who doesn't see the same, something's wrong with their eyes. Seriously. Someone who fails to acknowledge the inherent divinity of all human beings, regardless of their color, regardless of their ethnicity, regardless of their gender, regardless of their shape, regardless of any factor whatsoever. If you fail to see the equal divinity of all human beings and treat all human beings with equal respect, if you fail What's wrong with you? Can't you see? That's what Sri Krishna says here. You need to see with these eyes of wisdom. And how do you see the same divinity in all? Actually, let's see the next verse, and then I'll answer that last question. This verse will end this topic. Samam pashyan hi sarvatra, samam pashyan hi sarvatra, samavastitam ishwaram, samavastitam ishwaram, nahinastyatmanatmanam, nahinastyatmanatmanam, tato yati param gatim, tato yati param gatim. Pashyan, seeing. The one who is seeing, samam, same what? Second line end, Ishwaram. Just like the prior verse, samam Ishwaram, prior verse was samam parameshwaram. The one who sees the same inner divinity, sarvatra, everywhere, samavastitam, equally abiding in all living beings. For such a person, na hinasti. That person, literally, that person doesn't kill, but you can't take it literally. That person doesn't literally, atmanam na hinasti. That person doesn't kill atma. Atma doesn't get killed. That person doesn't overlook Atma. That person is not ignorant to the true inner divinity within. That person doesn't nahinasti atmana atmanam. That person doesn't fail to recognize one's own true nature due to their own inability, due to ignorance. That person recognizes their true nature as Satchidananda Atma, that inner divinity, that consciousness we've been talking about. Tataha, for this reason, that person yati, reaches param gatim, the highest goal. That person gains enlightenment. Now, there's one important point to put in here. How to recognize the inner divinity of all beings is very simple. When you recognize your own inner divinity, you simultaneously appreciate that it's true of everyone. If I recognize that in spite of my limitations as a human being, I'm flawed, I have plenty of defects, but if I recognize in spite of my human limitations, in spite of my defects, within me dwells that inner divinity. If I recognize it about myself, how can it not be true of you? So I recognize that in spite of my defects, there is that inner divinity. With that recognition, I can see, generally, people only see the defects. You look at others and you see defects. But with this, with the eyes of wisdom, so to speak, we can look past the defects of others and appreciate the fundamental divinity of all living beings. Very beautiful message that Sri Krishna gives here. That ends the topic, so this will be a good place to conclude our class today. Quick announcement, tomorrow our Vedanta class continues, Upadesha Sahasri, this powerful text of Sri Shankara, and we're starting a new chapter tomorrow. So if you haven't been attending, come tomorrow and we'll begin a new chapter and you can appreciate the brilliance of Sri Shankara's teachings. That's at 11 o'clock. Immediately after class at noon, then we have question-answer satsang time. So 11 o'clock class, 12 o'clock satsang. We'll conclude with our brief prayers at the altar, and then afterwards I'll sit out and greet anyone who wants to come up. Okay. Om Gananahan Tva Ganapatigam Avamahe Kaving Gavhinam Upamashravastamam Jeshtarajam Brahmanam Brahmanaspataha Nashrinvan Uttubasira Saranam Om Mahaganapataye Namaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavad Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha Vasudeva Sutam Devam Kamsachanuramardanam Devaki Paramhanandam Krishnam Vande Jagadgurum Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso ma jyotirgamaya mrityor ma hamratangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.